ladies and gentlemen. I have a great video for you guys today, but also a sad one, as today we have figured out a lot of what the original concept for the Revelations Easter egg was supposed to be. And it was supposed to be nothing like what we had with the summoning key, random egg steps, or just random symbols that made no sense. This video is going to explain the original idea that Jason Blundell had all the way back in 2016 for this map, and it would have been legendary. It would have definitely been much more deserving of a finale, and honestly, this makes me appreciate Revelations a lot less, considering what we had was just so shallow compared to the original vision that he had. So let's get straight into it. The Revelation spawn sequence where the Apothicon comes into the map and sucks up the Pack-a-Punch machine was supposed to be the same. However, Treyarch had this wild idea for you to be ingested by the Apothicon female god, stimulate her reproductive glands to then create pheromones, which would attract the male Apothicon god to achieve the Pack-a-Punch machine. Now, I just gotta say, thank God Treyarch didn't do that. That was one of the weirdest things I think I've ever said out loud, bro. But also, I think this is one of the craziest parts. The 1.0 staffs were not supposed to be a big sequence or storytelling point in this map. And actually, the main wonder weapon of this map should have been the 1.0 bows, as there is an area in Der Eisendrache on this map where you can see each of the altars for the bows, but they're all blocked off, which in my opinion proves this correct. And I think this would have been so much better, just because not many people who played Black Ops 3 even knew about the staffs from Origins. They should have just consistently came with all of the story and all of the lore with Der Eisendrache and kept with the bows. And to receive each bow, they were tied into this idea of the Keeper Protector, where each one would have the respective element and would need to be guided after completing puzzles and lockdowns. And what's also insane is there was supposed to be a myriad of specialist weapons, including the flamethrower, which is something I've always wanted, considering that all of Chronicles has the Annihilator. And the fact that this map was going to have a bunch more specialist weapons, and I think that would have taken place over the masks themselves, that would have been way more interesting, as I feel like so many people have just forgotten about the masks after all this time. And now the gateworms and the eggs were actually used to retrieve each of the bows, which makes more sense, as each symbol in the Revelations Easter egg actually represents the bow's element. And this made no sense in the actual Revelations Easter egg. It made no sense why we were getting gateworms and getting symbols to get random elements. It had no correlation with the actual subject matter. And when you hear about this actual idea, it makes so much more sense. Now, this Easter egg would then actually have you hatch each of the eggs into a gateworm, which, like I said, would then start the Keeper Protector sort of guide quest for that respective bow. And this also ties in to how Shadows of Evil's Pack-a-Punch quest was, and I really wish this was how Revelations actually played. Now, every bow had a specific place where you'd build it, being known as the Dark Arena, or a version of Kino der Toten, which probably ended up being the area where you teleport for the final boss and you take out all those Mardwas and all that. And that is also why they placed it inside of Kino der Toten. Now, it is kind of random that it is Kino der Toten where they decided to finish it. It's probably because that was like the most iconic zombies map of all time. And now the lockdowns would be what we saw with the elemental phases of the Easter egg with each Margwa. And to me, having the 1.0 bows would just make more sense than the 1.0 staffs. It really just would have made so much more sense, especially because Revelations was a lot of Call of Duty players' last zombies map ever. And it's sad that this arena basically had no inclusion in anything with the Great War or the whole lore of Black Ops 3. And also, apparently, in this dark arena, it would be like you would have some sort of projection of yourself there, and also in the Kino area as well. And it would be sort of like if you didn't complete the challenge for your bow on time, the Keynote or Toten Theater would have just been filled up with a bunch of dark smoke, and you'd have to interact with a lot of the room to essentially get all of the negative effects away. So you'd have to like get the spotlights from stop shining on you. You'd have to take out the candle lights. You'd also have to shoot the seats to shoot them down for some reason. And I am kind of glad that this was cut from the game, because it just seems a little bit too complex for the whole idea. But I do think that the Dark Arena should have been much more complicated than what it was. Now, there were apparently 6 challenges in this Dark Arena, and that could have meant that we would have gotten even a couple more bows with that. But let's get into the first one. Blood was the first challenge with the Blood Crystal, and the regular Keeper Protector would have been the guide for this challenge. Now, this one was about being tormented by the Shadow Man and finding the Blood Crystal in a crack in the wall. And once you did enough damage to it, it would then fall from a high elevation and actually reveal the Keeper Protector that way. And to me, that would just make so much more sense, considering that building the Keeper Protector never really made sense on Revelations, especially because there's like Keeper enemies. To me, that just did not make any sense, and it would have been a really cool challenge and would have fit in perfectly with how Garrod Krovi's Easter egg was built. So the second challenge was the electricity challenge, and you'd have to go to the Verrucht power area where a ball of energy needed to be transferred across multiple zombies, kind of like what we saw in the Victus Easter eggs. And this would have been then brought to the Keynote teleporter, where the electric ball would then split into 3, and you'd need the shield to pick up each of the orbs. This is again similar to what we saw with like the Ancient Evil Easter egg and the Blood of the Dead Easter egg, utilizing the shield. And then once these orbs would be deposited in jars at the Der Eisendrache area to then create the electricity rune for the Lightning Bow challenge in the Dark Arena. Now, this again would have been the exact same version where you see all these big pillars of electricity floating around, and then once you completed that, you would then get the electric bow. Now, fire was the third challenge, and this involved a floating ball of sun that we saw back in Der Eisendrache, where you'd bring a Gateworm to the Quick Revive machine and have this fireball go into 4 different areas on the map, presumably the 4 main islands in Revelations. And then you would then take these areas and have the fireball attack each of the zombie to then charge up the fireball. And once this fireball was done, it would then go back to the Dark Arena as the fire rune and have a similar challenge with the fire elemental Margwas, where the whole map becomes all lava. And then that would be the way you would receive the firebow. Now, this 4th challenge is probably one of my favorite. It's so sad that they cut this. The light challenge was the 4th challenge, and it involved bringing a Gateworm to the cell block at Mob of the Dead, and involved resurrecting the Wolf King in his knight armor at Der Eisendrache while he summoned all his wolves to get kills and to be escorted to a specific obelisk, which would then become the light room. And oh my gosh, this would have been so insane, because this makes so much sense as to why when you go and do the light challenge with the Margwas, it gives you the same 0 gravity like you had for the Wolfbow step in Der Eisendrache. And again, this would give you presumably the 1.0 version of the Wolfbow. Now, the Shadow Challenge was the 5th challenge, and it involved bringing a Gateworm to the temple front of Shangri-La, which you would then begin and sort of have 4 sort of lockdowns. Now, each of these lockdowns would be concluded by you clicking the Eclipse buttons in Shangri-La, and this would have just utilized each of the map settings so much more, while giving it that little bit of extra lore that is so desperately missing in the current version of Der Eisendrache, which genuinely just makes me upset, because I believe after you progress through this part, it would actually make the map darker, just like how the original Eclipse modes should have been. And then once you had the Shadow Rune challenge, it would have made the Dark Arena pitch black, and you'd have to take out the Margwas in complete darkness to receive the 1.0 Voidbow. And there would have also been some voice lines as well from the Voidbow urn that we had in Der Eisendrache. And again, this is just so sad that these two with so much lore got completely cut. And the 6th And last challenge was the weapon challenge. And this was actually about having a mini boss fight against the Shadow Man, which he would have 3 phases. The first phase would have the crazy place walls from Origins where they would fall down, and the Shadow Man would completely take away all of your weapons for each of these phases, and the only way you'd be able to damage him is by picking up the power-ups that he would drop. And so for the first phase, you get some really garbage tier weapons. For the second phase, you would then get a bunch of myriad of all sorts of special enemies, including like napalm zombies and the electric zombies. So maybe this would have spawned in like the original zombies from Shangri-La, or maybe even like the Spaceman from Moon. That would have been insane. And then you get slightly better weapons. And then the third phase would have just been all of the special zombies, much more walls, and then higher tier weapon drops. And then the reward for this, unfortunately, was only known to be getting either the Skull of Nunsopwe or the Ragnaroks. Now, I am kind of glad this got scrapped because you would have only been able to choose one of these specialist weapons and the reward would be terrible. So the concept is really cool, but in my opinion, to have made this so much better, they should have allowed you to choose one of any of the Black Ops 3 specialist weapons that we saw in multiplayer. Now, onto the main Easter egg. This would have been insane. The first step was changed to be a puzzle sequence where you had to use beast mode from Shadows of Evil to rotate statues, which would then also commence the next step. And to me, it is just so sad that beast mode was not only supposed to be part of the first step of the map, but also been a massive feature throughout the entirety of the map, and maybe also have been certain ways where we could have powered each of these 1.0 bow quests. And it's really sad because there were also, I remember people posting fake leaks of Revelations at the time where you could have had a red afterlife in the map, and this could have also been a part of the map as well, which is just so sad. Now, the second step of the map was collecting certain fragments of the summoning key by going across each of the jump pads on the island to unveil that Dr. Monty was inside of the summoning key. Now, you need like zombie souls, flesh of the apothecant, and then a ritual stone from Mob of the Dead to be able to start the Shadows of Evil type ritual to unlock Dr. Monty at the Dark Arena. Now, this ritual would have 4 phases with all the different variated enemies of Shadows of Evil, being the parasites, the meatballs, the margwas, and then all 3. And this is also the reason why there are multiple areas in this Dark Arena for you placing the summoning key, because each of these areas would have been one specific phase to unlock Dr. Monty out of the summoning key. And I'm also assuming that the rock that you would collect in Mob of the Dead is where the actual Owl's Hat item would have been. And so you would have had to collect that rock, maybe even heard a little bit of story from what they were planning to do, maybe with Blood of the Dead, with all 4 of the Mob of the Dead characters, and that would have been insane. And then after you complete this Dr. Monty ritual, what would have been insane is you would have gotten a mini Keeper boss fight from Drak, and the power would be completely shut off in the map. And then this is where the laser step from Revelations comes in, because you would turn on the power in each of these areas and charge the beams to attack Dr. Monty and not bring back Sophia into this map for literally no reason. There were so many scrapped ideas at this point in the document, and it would have been insane because we could have seen a Monty boss fight against Maxis, a Maxis boss fight against Monty, a Shadow Man boss fight against Monty as well. This would have just been insane. Like, there would have been multiple boss fights in this finale, and that would have made so much more sense comparatively to what we got. And if you beat this second to last boss fight, Dr. Monty would then give you a super Pack-a-Punch as a reward. And this is kind of similar to what we saw in the Golden Pack-a-Punch in Togger Toten, but it was so much better because this would not only give you much more ammo, a special Pack-a-Punch camo, more double pack activations or AATs like Turn, Dead Wire, Fireworks, but the craziest part is it would have a small chance for zombies to drop Mega Gobblegums upon immediate usage, which is Literally the craziest thing I would have ever heard. This would have been the greatest super Easter egg reward in all of zombies still to this day if that original concept actually made it into the game. Getting a whole perkaholic off of a zombie, and then you just be able to pop it by going over to him and picking it up. And then maybe if they would have brought back that concept to each of the maps, bro, this would have been the most legendary super Easter egg reward and was way better than the RK5 and garbage Takio's katana that we had, bro. And then the final boss fight of this map would then be a fight between Dr. Monty and Shadow Man, in which I believe you could choose who would win, and it would sort of change the outcome of the finale. Now, this fight would involve utilizing the rockets from Moon and Horizon Track that were going to either blow up the moon or Earth, and then you would basically send Shadows of Evil portals towards each of these missiles to redirect those missiles to destroy either Monty or the Shadow Man. Now, this cutscene was supposed to be much longer as well for the finale of Revelations, and it was supposed to replay the Origins intro right at the end. And just listening to all this really makes me hate what version of Revelations we actually got, because this version of Revelations ended up just being a prolonged quest to get the Apothicon Servant upgrade, when the actual purpose of this map was supposed to be so much more, even despite not being a part of the Great War finale that obviously Jason Blundell was planning for Black Ops 4. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me know what you guys think about all of these leaks for this Easter egg, because genuinely, I think that now that I've heard this, Revelations is probably my least favorite Black Ops 3 Zombies map.